Hey guys, Shakir here again with another Inferno difficulty video guide. This time I'll be covering Belial, the ending boss of Act 2. Now this video in particular, the kill of Belial, only took me about 5 minutes and 30 seconds, and I don't feel like that's enough time to completely cover everything that there is to know about this boss. The tactics I use, my spec, and different moves he uses, so I'm going to kind of split it up into two parts and run the video in two parts. This first part, I'm going to discuss the different abilities that Belial has. This fight is split up into three different phases. During this first phase, Belial will just kind of stand on his platform over there, and he'll summon a bunch of snake adds all over the place. And these serpent adds in Inferno hit very, very hard. They will completely melt you if you stand next to them for more than a couple seconds. Okay, after you kill all the serpent adds, the boss will transition into phase 2. During this phase, Belial will kind of follow you around and he'll try to punch you. He'll also periodically back away from your character and he'll send out this kind of wave of green fire. These don't hit terribly hard, but this phase is very chaotic, so you want to try to avoid getting hit by them as best you can to minimize the damage taken. He'll also periodically summon 3 serpent adds, and these are the same adds that you'll fight in phase 1, and you just kind of want to kite them around and avoid them because they do hit just as hard as their phase 1 counterparts. In this phase, Belial also has a, I guess, teleport, and periodically he'll kind of like try to warp to you to kind of punch you or beat the shit out of you, and you just want to kind of avoid that as best you can. He moves pretty quickly in this fight. Well, I guess it's not really a teleport so much as a slide, but he moves quick enough that he gets within range to attack you very, very quickly. The serpents also have a chance to do a channeled lightning ring, and if you stand in this ring for too long, it'll completely devastate you. When you get him down to about maybe a little less than a quarter of his life, the phase will transition to phase 3. He'll go back up onto his platform and kind of shatter the world around him, and you'll be sucked into this like vortex world. This phase is very, very difficult. There's a very narrow margin of error when it comes to these abilities because they hit super hard. So the first ability he has is kind of like he'll just hit the ground with his arm. And you know when this is coming because there'll be a little ring, a green ring, that will appear about 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds before he hits the ground. And he'll alternate between both of his arms and using both of his arms at the same time. To deal with this ability, what you want to do is you kind of want to stick to the back of the ring, because if you look, his arm is the most narrow at the tip. So the hitbox at the very far edge of the room is a lot smaller, so it's a lot easier to get out of this kind of, I guess, ground pound ability. And also, when he does hit with both of his hands at the same time, it hits very, very hard. If you're in the middle of it, it'll pretty much one-shot you. So you definitely want to avoid that as best as you can. Now he has a pretty predictable order in this phase of abilities that he uses. He'll always kind of hit the ground a few times, and then he'll do a breath, and then he'll hit the ground a few more times, and then he'll do a channeled, I guess, explosion. So the order is pretty consistent on abilities. The second ability that he really uses is he does a breath. Now this breath arcs across the entire width of the platform, and it'll kind of only hit the very center portions. So what you want to do to avoid this breath is when you hear it or you know it's coming, you get to the far corner, either the left corner or the right corner of the room, because the breath only hits the middle portions. If you do get hit by the breath though, it ticks very hard, so you really want to kind of avoid being hit by it. And there's also an achievement if you do it. The last ability he has is he'll kind of submerge his two hands in the ground and kind of its channel exploding in rings. I found that if I got hit by any single one of those rings, I would pretty much melt. They would hit me for somewhere around 40,000 damage, which means they were hitting me for about 80-something thousand total. So you really want to avoid getting hit by those, because they will absolutely melt you. Okay, now the video is going to loop through again. This time I'm going to cover my spec and what I chose to do. Now if you notice during Phase 1, I'm pretty much using Blizzard to kite the ads. If you pay attention to my spec, you'll see that I don't really have any damaging abilities at all, really. So what I really tend to do is just summon the Venom Hydra like always, and I just kite around using the Blizzard. For passives, I do have the ability that gives you increased damage to anything that's snared by Frost, so the Venom Hydra actually is doing a great deal of damage to these mobs that are consistently snared by the Blizzard. In addition to that, I'm also using Glass Cannon and Force Weapon to massively up my DPS, because my DPS and my gear in total is somewhat under geared for this boss. I had to try to increase my DPS and do as best as I could. Of course, Diamond Skin to mitigate damage, and Teleport was really helpful to get me out of some of those tricky situations. And I found that the best rune to use for Teleport was Fracture, because sometimes those decoys save me life. Now, if you're having trouble in Phase 2, you can actually replace Force Weapon with either Frost Nova or Mirror Images. And I found that either of those two abilities gave you a lot more control over the second phase and makes it a great deal easier to get to Phase 3. The only difficulty I found was that during Phase 3 I would sometimes slip up, because the amount of time I would spend in Phase 3 would increase because of the less amount of damage I'm doing. So it's very hard to keep the concentration, at least for me, to avoid every single ability in the phase. So I switched to Force Weapon to kind of minimize the amount of time I have to spend in the phase. But if this isn't the situation for you, then feel free to use either of those abilities. They work amazingly during this phase to kind of keep these mobs off you. Another thing you could do is use Archon, and I found that using Archon right during the beginning when he shifts to Phase 2, I was able to burst him down to maybe 50 to 45% of his health quite easily. So that's always a consideration. There's many different specs you can utilize. It really depends on your personal skill level and gear level of what works best for you in this particular fight. But I found that this spec worked best for me. During the third phase, I would do all the kind of dodges you'd expect. I would avoid all the ground pounds, but I would always save my teleport for when he channels these ring explosions, because occasionally you get kind of trapped in and there's like nowhere to run on the ground to avoid an explosion. And considering that these one-shot you, the teleport is extremely useful to kind of get yourself out of that situation. You can just teleport out, and it'll always be up for the next time you go that way. In addition to that, make sure you keep Force Armor up, because I was not using the... I don't remember the exact name, it's the ability that increases the duration of your armors and gives you life per second. But I wasn't using that, so I really had to make sure that my Force Armor was always up. Although you really shouldn't be getting hit by anything in this phase anyway, because odds are it'll kill you. Lastly, I used my last passive actually was Astral Presence for the increased arcane power generation. And for this phase, pretty much what I do is I drop my Venom Hydra, or just pounds on him, and I kind of try to Blizzard him whenever I can, so he takes that increased amount of damage from Frost. Straightforward phase, just dodge everything, like I said. Now this video was actually filmed or after the Force Armor nerf, and as well as the crit bonus to Living Lightning, so the critical mass strikes. So it was a lot more difficult than if I did this fight, say, pre-Force Armor nerf, because pre-Force Armor nerf, I would be able to survive any of those explosions as long as I got hit by maybe one or two at most. It would still be possible to survive. Now, the way Force Armor works is it only absorbs up to 100% of your HP. And I don't yet have the resistances. But, that's Belial. And I guess I can run this video one more time in fast forward for you guys in case you miss anything. But as always, if you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave me a message or a comment, and I'll try to answer it as soon as I can. And I'll also be continuing to post videos as often as I can, so if you are interested in seeing those videos, please subscribe. And that's about it. Thanks, guys, and I wish you the best.